Welcome back to the World Economic Forum on Africa. We're still focusing on agriculture, investing in transformation. And I have Akin Adesina, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Nigeria, Philip Kiriro, the President and Chairman of the Eastern African Farmers Federation, Kenya, Jane Karuku, President, Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, that's AGRA, Michael Mack, the CEO of Syngenta International, and James Mwangi, Group CEO, Equity Bank, Kenya. James, I just want to stay with this financial discussion for a little longer. Are bankers becoming innovative when it comes to insurance projects, or insurance products rather, for farmers?
It is true, banks are becoming innovative in managing risks, but basically what the banks are doing are to pool partners who can provide financial services. Banks are not really underwriting the insurance policies, but they are saying, can we pool, create an ecosystem? Can we create a complete value chain where we disaggregate the risk and get the specialists to underwrite that risk? So I see that, for instance, livestock insurance is now in the market, crop insurance, weather insurance, and these are now becoming helpful tools that banks are using to cover the weather risks.
Michael, you are present in 90 countries. You employ 27,000 people across the globe. One of your key focuses is crop protection. Can I put the bad word in there, pesticides? How is Africa receiving the crop protection game?
Well, today, Africa, I mentioned it a bit ago that the productivity here in Africa is not very high. In part, because they don't have great access to markets, they're not using the most modern tools available to them. And let's face it, if you have basic fertilizer, if you've got the money to be able to use a good seed in the ground, then it is critical for you to protect that investment, because those are the front-end investments. And Mother Nature wants to have a go at the farm, as you know, whether it's an insect or weeds or a disease from fungus. If these things aren't protected, the farmer is going to lose 100% of their crop. So it's a necessary and important tool to agriculture.
But you've battled with pesticides traditionally. There was a revolution against using pesticides generally. Can you take me through how that perception is perhaps changing? Because you're right, you need to protect against the unforeseen, and in this instance, often disease.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the very first incidents of pesticides have already been discovered 5000 BC. So farmers have been battling pests who've been competing with their crops for a very long time. I appreciate that in less enlightened parts of the world, as people move away from the farm and move into the cities, they want to make romantic the idea that farming is easy and that it's something that they can do without tools. People who live in farming communities and in rural communities understand very well that these are essential tools, and each and every year, the new products that come out are better than the ones that preceded them.
Jen, how are you working with the G8 and their initiative for agriculture, specifically open data, which I know has recently been tabled? It's actually where I picked up the iCow information out of Kenya.
Okay. I think we are working with them to develop data, because one of the things that lacks in Africa, unlike in other continents, is data to support the farmers, even in terms of how much rain are we going to expect, what's the price of commodities, what's a better pesticide to use so that I don't destroy my environment, what's a better seed in terms of the ecological zones. And we are struggling with this data even in terms of what are the practices that will lead us to have a great impact in terms of solving our problems. So we are working with G8 in terms of trying to build pool data, because nobody has it right now, and we are working to create it.
Are the East African Farmers Federation starting to access that data as well from the G8?
I would like to say that to a limited extent. I think we need to actually do more around it than it is right now. Because when it actually comes to protection of crops out there, I think there's more to it in small-scale agriculture than just protecting the crop. Because we actually happen to be the immediate consumers of what we grow. And it's actually very important that around use and application of pesticides, the small-scale farmers are actually properly trained and informed, so that we actually have a culture that protects not only us as consumers, but those who actually come to the markets in the rural areas. The other issue I would like to capture just quickly is the issue of financing agriculture. Because I think for us, it is farmers that have actually been pushing for agricultural banks. There are even commodities that have actually gone to an extent of saying, hey, let's have a coffee farmers bank. But I think that was actually out of problems that a lot of us actually had, because there were times when commercial banks had not gone rural. And I would like to thank Equity and other banks from Kenya that have actually gone to the rural areas. So we did not actually have a CV to present to the banks to be able to access facilities. Two, with the growth in trade and getting a small producers actually producing along specific value chains like small dairy, we are actually able to have a common bond where we actually paid through banks, and that provides the bank with information on individual farmers. And then the issue of insurance. I would like to say that the East African Farmer Federation was actually involved in a program with COMESA, the Common Market for East and South Africa, in trying to actually market, weather index insurance. And I think this is exactly how we need governments, because what is actually lacking out there is actually credible weather stations that can be relied on. And I think it is only the public sector, it's only governments that can actually be able to do that. And then beyond that, when it comes to issues of lending and getting the banks actually working with us, I have personally been involved in a dialogue of a group of stakeholders that is working around getting the banks, getting finances work for agriculture, where we have the central bank governors, we have the commercial banks. And the issue of risks keep coming. And we need governments in this. And I'm glad the governors of central bank are actually picking it, because we need to actually address issues of risks.
Minister Adesina, I want to come back to Grow Africa, an informal alliance formed 2 years ago at the World Economic Forum in Cape Town. You are the latest member of Grow Africa, and as I said, I was listening to the session earlier today. Do you think that this organization is gaining momentum, it's going to have traction in forcing the agricultural agenda?
No, absolutely. As I said in the beginning, for far too long, we've looked at agriculture as a development activity, and now we're looking at agriculture as a business. And so what Grow Africa actually does is to facilitate linkages between agribusinesses and countries. Take the case of Nigeria, my country, for example. One of the fundamental things we did was that we said we were going to take investment focus, we're going to be very much focused on value chains in which we have comparative advantage, and that we're going to work with the private sector. In the last 1 year that we've actually launched our agricultural transformation agenda, we have attracted $8 billion worth of investment commitments from the private sector. And some of them are here, as the flour mills of Nigeria here, Dangote, Cargill, Unilever, and others that are investing in Nigeria. And that's because of the fundamental policy shift that we made. And I think this is very important, even coming back to the issue of the insurance thing. If farmers don't have market, if there are no agribusinesses that will buy from them, process what they have, why will they invest in insurance? Why will they take credit? And so I think it's important to link smallholder farmers to off-takers, the agribusinesses that can actually buy and process what they do. Philip raised the issue about the role of public policy when it comes to insurance products. We know whether index insurance works. The fundamental issue with it, though, is it affordable to smallholder farmers? And I think this is where the public sector has to come in and subsidize the cost of the premiums for these weather index insurance products to be able to go to scale. And secondly, and most fundamentally, is that we need to also make sure that when we structure these partnerships with the private sector insurance markets, that we liberalize that market. In Nigeria, for example, we have Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Company. It's a monopoly trying to do agricultural insurance. We've taken that decision that we are going to liberalize that. We're going to get other insurance companies into the mix, let them develop better products. The premiums are going to go down, and therefore farmers are going to be able to afford it. But I think in everything we do in Africa, we must not abandon the farmers. For way too long, we ask the questions why farmers are poor in Africa. And I think that's because we just simply, it's almost like you go to Olympics, you have no shoes, and you're trying to run with Usain Bolt. I mean, you've got to support farmers with institutions, with finance, with credit, with things to mitigate their risks and connect them to markets. And I think the time for that is now, and I think Grow Africa provides an excellent platform for doing that.
You make an excellent point. You've got to connect farmers with access to finance, to credit, and you've also got to provide them with access to infrastructure. You can't have a discussion on enabling farmers across rural Africa without understanding the plight and the need for infrastructure. Jane, can I get you to comment there?
Yes, I think in many parts of Africa, we see a lot of productivity. Like now when it's raining, a lot of produce. But the post-harvest losses could go up to 30–60%, depending on the location. I think the estimate right now is that we are wasting about $4 billion worth of produce.
Simply because the farmers can't get it to market?
Just simply because there is no infrastructure to get from where it is a lot to where there doesn't exist or where the market is.
Or they can't store it.
Or they also can't store it because we are very poor also in terms of even cottage value addition processes or technologies, which is another way which probably can be a double-edged sort of solution to attract youth into agriculture, because the value addition will have more money and it's less tedious than the guy in the whole day.
Michael, can we see here private sector making a dent at providing infrastructure, specifically private sector players like yourself? You are the largest spender on research and development, one of the largest spenders on research and development in the agricultural space globally. Can not some of that spend go to infrastructure?
Well, I mean, look, we're not in the business of building roads and bridges. I'll make that clear. That's not a deep research and development school. But what we are able to do, because many crops, of course, are short season crops, between the time they plant and the time they harvest, some 6 months or so of time goes by. Syngenta routinely is responsible for providing the working capital for farmers by giving them credit terms through our distributors and dealers. So a big part of a farmer's risk profile is that upfront investment in putting the inputs into their crop, and the technology providers are the ones largely that finance that. It's a big load off their mind.
You bring us back to finance. I'm coming back to infrastructure. Minister Adesina, I want you to add, but James, just coming back to education. Long-term finance, short-term finance, working capital. Do the farmers on the ground have these skills, and how are you helping to empower them in terms of financial literacy?
Thank you. It is true. If once we complete the value chains and ecosystem, I think we need still to invest a lot on the farmer, because essentially infrastructure and value chains will not increase productivity on the farmer. It's the farmer themselves that needs to increase the yield, the productivity, based on the use of knowledge. Let's say certified seeds, fertilizers, right chemicals, right application, farming at the right time. And that, I think, is where huge investments from public resources needs to go. Well, I think we can say that currently the African farmer at the small-scale level is not globally competitive because the knowledge has not been really institutionalized. So we need to invest a lot in that area.
Michael, take it.
By the way, in traditional agriculture, the governments were deeply involved in extension services, as James was just saying. I think increasingly with technology, I mean, think iPad, think mobile phone, the ability to confer a lot of this knowledge in microclimates throughout the world the cost of that is going to go down substantially, and the rate of knowledge acquisition by growers is going to go up exponentially.
Philip, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I would like to raise one issue, because as Mwangi has actually put it, already the banks are actually working a lot with the farmers. As I said, most of our commercial banks are actually now in the rural areas, and we've actually formed a bulk of their clients. But we still see a missing link when it comes to the way the banks work with the farmers, and especially the small-scale farmers. Because a bank is an institution that is professional in nature and has got procedures. And our feeling that we still need to connect the bankers with the farm organizations. I would like to see a situation where the East African Farmers Federation is actually working with Mwangi, and for him to actually develop confidence in our institutions. Because we are not movements. We are professional farm organizations with technical people in our secretariat. For example, the East African Farmer Federation has actually got a trade program officer, highly qualified.
Philip, I'm going to ask you to keep your mic to this. Keep looking at me. We'll address it to James in a moment.
So what we are saying is that for small-scale farmers, I think we need to connect with the banks so that we can actually be able to ensure that we operate in a manner that, small farmers are actually operating also through their institutions. Because as individuals, they're actually quite vulnerable. And we need to actually work on that.
James, right to respond.
If I jump in there, then what we really need to do is then to formalize agribusinesses. Because essentially what you are doing is that you are confronting an informalized sector with the formal players. Banks comes here very formalized, and agribusiness has not been really formalized. And that's why I said capacity needs to be built so that it's two partners.
Organized agriculture is stronger.
Yeah.
Minister Adesina, let's get your input here.
I want to talk about infrastructure because, you take, for example, tomatoes in Nigeria. We have a vast valley in Kano which produces over 65% of the tomatoes, and it rots away every day because there is no processing capacity there. You take a look at Nigeria in terms of the production of pineapples. We are the #1 producer of pineapples in Africa, but it rots away, we don't have it. So what we've decided to do is that it's not the role of the private sector to invest in power, water, and roads. If the private sector is investing in power, water, and roads for them to put their food manufacturing plants there, that's an indication of market failure and government failure. And so what we've decided to do in Nigeria is to create these things we call staple crop processing zones. Essentially what they are like your export processing zones. So the food manufacturing industry, companies have been attracted to areas of high food production. And when they come there, we automatically upgrade power, water, and roads for them. So these staple crop processing zones, we are providing them with fiscal incentives. We are providing them with infrastructure incentives. I take the case of cassava, for which Nigeria is the largest producer in the world. And I want Nigeria to be the largest processor of it in the world. And we are working today with Cargill Flour Mills of Nigeria and all the Coca-Cola off-takers to process that cassava into starch, from starch into sweeteners, and even from starch also into sorbitol. But for those guys to come into those areas, we have to provide the infrastructure. So I think this is an opportunity for banks, financial institutions, multilateral development banks to put money into infrastructure. In Nigeria, World Bank, Africa Development Bank, USAID, DFID are supporting investment in infrastructure. And I think that's going to be very key for us if we are going to attract the private sector to go in there and process and add